Hi, I'm Tom Gale. Welcome to this third of a three-part special MDM video series on ways for distribution leadership teams to think about managing transformation and change management, and how to get the most out of these initiatives. My guest is Bill Dudziak, lead strategic consultant for PROS. Over the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk about metrics for change management programs. In our last two videos, we touched on how leadership teams can take the vision of a future state of an organization and translate that into reality through effective planning, communication, training, and tracking. And Bill, in the 1-hour webcast we did last week, as part of this, you went deeper into the methodologies and best practices for successful change efforts. I highly recommend that for anyone involved in a change management effort, your slide deck and presentation, I thought, were a really strong roadmap for any distribution executive to review and share with the team that's responsible for any type of transformation or change project. The fact of the matter is, every single organization is undergoing some type of a change program or transformation, whether it's in digital, whether it's in their sales model and their sales team, whether it's simply from work from home changes. All of this is in flux, and it will be for quite a while. So I just want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights on that. So with that, Bill, let's talk about best practice and measuring change initiatives in a distribution organization. Why the case for measuring? What's the key pieces around measurement?
So really, you need to measure because it gives you an unbiased quantitative view on how you're doing. And so we'll talk a little bit more about quantitative versus qualitative metrics. But really, when you're reporting out how the project is doing, you need to have a measurement associated with it. It's not enough. And if I was in senior leadership, I wouldn't accept it's going fine, or it's on time and on budget. Those really don't describe the health of the project. What we talked about throughout the earlier tapings of the video series, and especially on the webinar, is change management and adoption is what really determines the health of a project. And this is really a way to qualify that.
Yeah, and we talked also previously about the cadence in terms of check-ins and how important that is based on the complexity of the project, sort of how often you're really tracking and what's going on with that. So outline for us some of the steps that are really critical as far as the metrics part of change management goes.
Absolutely. So I really want to emphasize that you need to measure the simple tasks that the sales organization or whatever organization is going through the transformation, measure the tasks that are completely under their control. So I'm going to liken this back to a pricing deployment for an enterprising software solution. Likely the stated goal of that project is to raise margin. But ultimately, there is too much within a margin that is outside of a sales organization's control, right? So you need to start with the simple items that the salesman can completely control. The first being, very simply, do they open the tool when they're quoting the contract, the order, or whatever? Again, a task. It's binary, it's yes, no, there's no nebulous maybes in there, and it's something under the sales organization's control. From there, you're going to need to get much more complex, right? So again, in a pricing tools that are for B2B businesses generally will present a pricing envelope comprising of a target price, and then bounded on either side, on the bottom by a floor, and on the top by the expert price. And that floor is essentially a walk-away price. Don't sell below that. So the second step would be something easy like stop quoting below floor. Again, very easy to do, binary, completely under the sales organization's control. Then you're going to get a little bit more complex and start measuring the percent of target realized. Again, all under the complete auspices and control of the sales organization. Now, going from there, percent of target realized to the ultimate goal of the project, the increase in margin, that is incumbent on the project team to do that. They are going to need to link the percent of target realized to a growth in margin by doing either test and control or A/B testing and proving out that the higher the percentage of the target realized translates to a larger growth in gross margin. And so you are now separating what the sales organization can control from what the project goals are and what the technology is providing, and translating that into the financial objectives of the company.
And we've been using the implementation of a pricing system as an example, but this, I mean, this it could be implementation of e-commerce or CRM, or, you know, even outside of technology projects. It could specifically with a sales team be focusing on going after a specific target market, for example, and really identifying the metrics for reaching goals that are set out there. What I like about how you put this together is really there's variables beyond the control of the people who are directly implementing the program, and you have to be really careful. I mean, it sounds simple at one level, but you have to be really careful to create these very basic metrics before you can start to build into some of the more complex aspects of it.
That's exactly right. I mean, for instance, if you were asking a sales organization to penetrate a new channel or a new market with the hopes of growing sales profitably, you know, what's under their control is, are they making the calls? Are they finding opportunities? Are they quoting the opportunities? Now, if there's the presence of a very strong competitor there who is taking a competitive reaction and saying, no, I don't want another competitor in this market, you know, it may be that while the sales organization is doing everything that they can in quoting this new business, they just can't do it profitably because of the presence of other competitors, other market nuances, maybe that aren't under that sales organization's control.
Yeah. But I mean, the key piece here, Bill, is that if you identify the goal as we want to increase our sales 10% in a specific market, for example, you've got to go and you have to deconstruct that into X number of calls. You know, the type of customer that they're calling on, you know, you really have to dig in deep and into specific activities that salesperson is going to undertake, and really take a look at those first in terms of, like you say, there may be other external circumstances that won't let you get to that goal. Mm-hmm. But unless you're really measuring those very basic foundational pieces in terms of number of calls, the type of business that's being called on, et cetera, you're not going to, if you just have that fuzzy 10% goal, it may not be fuzzy, but it's too generalized. You're not going to get there.
Exactly.
So let's, you know, that's more around the quantitative measures. Let's talk a little bit about qualitative measures.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there may be something like a stated goal that I want less turnover, right? And so less turnover either in my customers or employees. With the labor shortage that's going on right now, employee satisfaction is more relevant than ever. So you may put in some programs to drive customer satisfaction, to drive employee satisfaction. And again, it's incumbent to have some kind of measurement to say, how's it going and what's the return on my investment? So it's very easy to do customer surveys or employee surveys and gauge happiness, measure engagement even within these surveys is a great way to judge how you're doing and things like that. Those are specific things that can be measured. And again, it would be then incumbent on the project team to see if I am engaging with the customers more and they are happier because of these surveys, Does that translate to more sales? That's where your A/B testing can come in. If I am having specific programs for employees, and if they become happier, again, through A/B testing or test and control, do we actually have less turnover? So again, we're measuring more of a qualitative project, but we are still using concrete quantitative measures to judge the progress.
So you've been involved in many change projects. Where have you seen the I guess the breakdowns across the quantitative and qualitative metrics that people put in place?
It really depends on the company that you're with, right? And what the DNA of the company is. When I worked at Home Depot, that was a very buttoned up organization, and kind of change was just mandated and it was routinely accepted through the organization. Whole Foods, a little bit different story, right? So maybe not as buttoned up on data and processes and like that. What makes Whole Foods go is the people there. And so making sure whether the project is technically oriented or more personally oriented, always having a pulse on the employees and doing employee feeling surveys and things like that are very, very important. So what I would say, it kind of depends, and it really is about the DNA of the organization. I would say if you can't point your finger at the specific DNA, or if your company doesn't have a robust history of accepting change well, then you're probably going to have to do a lot more of your employees' surveys along with the technical and quantitative measures that I described earlier.
So if I translate that, Bill, it's important to be realistic about the culture of our organization for more process and data driven companies.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be able to push more change efforts that are going to be accepted because it's part of the culture. But in companies that are not as much so, and either more personality or I guess less structured, you're going to need to spend more time to figure out how you're going to pull that change through the organization successfully. When you were talking about that push versus pull kind of felt to me like the right way to think about this.
That is a great point, Tom. That is a great point. If your company's DNA is accepting of change, it can be more of a push. If it is not as accepting, or it's not just part of their DNA, then creating that excitement and having it be more of a pull is going to be a key.
Yeah, and Bill, when we first started talking about this, several months ago about pulling this together, to me, this is the punchline of everything that we're doing here. Is because if you take a look at what we've gone through in the last 18 months, this is a unique opportunity for companies really to address their cultures and change in their cultures. We were just talking a little bit ago about how we're doing this in the fall of 2021. And companies really are starting to shift to bringing more people back on premise. It's all over the place. We're never going to go back to what we were before, but it seems like people are very anxious to at least get people more face to face than they have in the past. And it seems to me that this is an opportunity really to bring more structure, more process into organizations that maybe didn't have it before. And because they, from my perspective, it's if an organization can figure out how to be agile in the way that it can change and change quickly, I mean, they're going to be much better from a competitive standpoint in terms of what's happening in all the markets right now.
Absolutely. Being nimble is very much a key going forward, and having the processes in place so that when change is required, you are able to execute on it quickly. That's very important. But Tom, I want to talk a little bit further on that. We were talking again earlier, and some of my children, they work for companies, and they have closed the offices. So there is now no requirement for going back into the office at all. Everybody is remote, and some of these are very big companies. So we're really going to have to think about how you can affect change across an organization without having common meeting spaces, without having that one-on-one interaction, right? And when you need to have the hard discussions about change, you can't do it over a phone or email. At least with Zoom, I can read body language and see how they're physically reacting in addition to the inflection within in their voice. And I think that is going to be a big deal going forward as well.
Bill, I thank you so much for your insights in this three-part video series that we did, as well as the webcast. Again, I just want to remind, I highly recommend that anyone involved in change management efforts, Bill's slide deck and the presentation were a wonderful roadmap for a reality check for any types of change management projects, any kind of transformation that you're doing in your organization right now. We'll have links to that available, and I recommend you share that with your team responsible for those types of projects as well. With that, Bill, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for joining us. And my special thanks to PROS for its ongoing support of distribution industry education and research. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's always a pleasure to work with you and the broader MDM organization. I hope my passion for this subject comes across. And honestly, I would love to deep dive with anybody on that. I tell the story, it really would save my wife and the kids from having to discuss pricing and change management with me.
Yep, you heard his plea, folks. Thanks again, Bill. Take care.
Absolutely.